Hey guys, this is Blake. This is a video response to Asalieri's review of Angry Joe. Just so you guys know that I am a fan, and this is not meant to be disrespectful. It's also not to be a review of ASA. Actually, oddly, I've been asked to review Pissed Jose, but never ASA himself. This isn't a full-on even video on my part, so it's partly vlogged and partly scripted, and mostly I just took notes and I'm going off that. So this definitely will feel a lot choppier than my usual video. Although, for the record, I could see why he'd hate Angry Joe. In fact, even my review warns people of ASA's tastes against watching Angry Joe. So first off, Joe's review of Magica, it was pretty weak. And I felt this even before ASA released his video. But I even state in my review that you can have the occasional awful review. It happens to everyone. So what were some of the things that ASA had to say?
Good coming from an independent developer.
And here we have our first inaccuracy. No, Joe, Paradox didn't just come out of nowhere. They're the ones distributing the game, after all.
Now, okay, that is a mistake. ASA challenged me to compare the Irate Gamer and Angry Joe, so let me post an equivalent mistake on Irate Gamer's part.
That's right, it's Jaws. This famous great white shark ruled the oceans in the early 80s.
Actually, Jaws was only popular in the 70s. By the 80s, the series had pretty much fallen and had become a joke. Now, I don't hold too much against Irate Gamer for this. Joe's mistake and Irate Gamer's mistake there are mistakes that certainly shouldn't be ignored, and I want to point out that I do warn of Joe's mistakes in my review too, but they're contained mistakes. That doesn't affect his critiquing from you. That does not affect the overall review. They're just minor, they distract you for 2 seconds kind of mistakes. Now, ASA does have a very linear style. He judges something scene by scene, so it's no shock that those type of errors annoy him more. That's just his style. But for me, Irate Gamer's little mistakes are easy to shrug off. Irate Gamer's mistakes only become an issue when they start affecting the overall review. Take the controversial Aladdin review, where he gets stuck at a point, spending like 30 seconds just ranting because he can't get a jewel. He somehow overlooks that there is a parachute he could use to get that. I mean, that not only kills the flow of the review, but it also really hurts his credibility. Because it means that he's either a really bad gamer, or that he just hasn't played too much of the game. Worse, what about how he apparently forgot that Tekken is played for its arcade mode, not its scenario campaign? He tried to fix this in his YouTube upload, but by then it was too late. Irate Gamer does this stuff all the time, and it kills his criticisms. He seems to only play these games for like an hour before reviewing them. And that's why the information faults hurt Irate Gamer more than they hurt most people. And I'm actually one of the kinder people to Irate Gamer. But the only error Joe makes in that review, at least that ASA points out, is minor. It doesn't mislead the viewer or affect the outcome. I will concede, though, that I probably should have made a bigger issue of Joe's mistakes, however.
You know, I can't help but get the feeling he wants to sell you something. Most likely he's waiting for that glorious day when the video game industry is finally willing to give him a job as a corporate shill. He's making sure right now to let you know he's not above selling out. Hell, the fact that he's on thatguywiththeglasses.com is already proof of that.
Now, I don't get that one. Isn't a reviewer supposed to convince people to buy or avoid something? It's not like he's telling us to buy Sonic Freeriders or anything bad like that. That's like criticizing a reviewer for, well, reviewing something. I mean, would you criticize Ebert for telling us to watch something like The Hurt Locker? That's just bizarre. As for joining that guy with the glasses, well, what about Rue? Is he a sellout too? I think as long as you don't change out your style, even joining the site isn't technically selling out. Although unfortunately, most do switch up their styles to get more views, by appearing in crossovers and stuff like that. Joe is actually one of the few people who hasn't really changed, so I wouldn't call him a sellout, but if you think just joining the website makes you a sellout, then that's your choice. As for the humor, I can't argue with that. There are no rules as to what we consider to be funny. Humor is unpredictable, unreliable, and unstable. In my review, I do warn that Joe can be pretty over the top. As for the bulk of ASA's review, he starts repeating past points and drops other points in at random. I mean, he goes from Joe making a mistake to Joe selling out, and then suddenly back to Joe's first mistake, with no build-up whatsoever. He also repeats the selling aspect at least once, and the 4-player co-op and single-player mode bit twice. He repeats too many things, and at one point, ASA even takes Joe grossly out of context.
You can mix and match the spells as you discover new and interesting spells that these things combine to create. Half the fun of the game is discovering them all. My favorite and a really powerful one that I discovered is ice, which is a combination of water and cold.
You really discovered that all by yourself, huh? Water and cold equals ice. Bravo!
Okay, yeah, that seems really bad, and Joe could have definitely phrased that better. But did Asa miss the whole lead up to that point?
And to be honest, it's not all that complicated. You got your spells mapped to 8 keyboard buttons, Q, W, E, and R keys, and also the A, S, D, and F keys. Now you could queue up 5 of these spells, like say for example the same of a particular spell 5 times to make it a more powerful version. Or you can mix and match the spells as you discover new and interesting spells that these things combine to create. Half the fun of the game is discovering them all. My favorite and a really powerful one that I discovered is ice, which is a combination of water and cold.
I don't know, you didn't post that part. Unfortunately, there are fans who won't bother watching Joe's video and will rely on Asalieri's words, making Asalieri's comments on Joe's fan base at the end funny for all the wrong reasons. Every fan base is like that. It's full of people who want to be told what to think and what to feel. And people getting in on this comment just goes to show that. On the other hand, ASA does score some good points. He makes a big issue of Joe backpedaling, which I thought was important, and I thought the whole 4-player co-op and single-player mode was a pretty funny bit too. It's not like I think ASA's review sucked or anything like that, but prior to the VGA fiasco, the only That Got the Glasses reviewer ASA seemed to consider reviewing was Spoony. He didn't like Joe's work, but he never seemed to deem him awful enough to review. It wasn't really until my review that he even decided to go ahead and review him. I think ASA couldn't find really enough in Joe's review to make fun of, so he just fell back on past points, and the end result was that his review kind of felt a bit overlong and a little redundant. I mean, I wouldn't even bother that much if the review was maybe 5 to 10 minutes shorter. At least 5 minutes. But anyway, here is actually my main theory as to why Asalieri really hates Angry Joe's works. Asalieri thinks Joe is a new fad gamer, which is internet lingo for somebody getting into games once they realize how popular game reviewing is. While there is some basis for this, mainly in that Joe has never played a Final Fantasy game until Final Fantasy 13, and I do think that Joe probably didn't really get into the gaming world until maybe the first Xbox days, as his knowledge seems to be restricted to that. I don't think he necessarily got into them just because video game reviews became popular, and here is why. The reason why I don't think Angry Joe just became a gamer just to get into video game reviews is he knows too much about the mechanics of a video game review. He knows too many technical terms. Like, for example, once again, if I did a movie, I'd point out the cinematography, the character arcs, the narrative flow, whatever. When you're around reviewing movies so long that you get to know how to do them. But if I were to pick up a video game like this one, I'd be totally confused. I'd just be saying, okay, the graphics are good, the gameplay is good, and that's it. So unless you could find maybe an earlier review of Angry Joe where he doesn't seem to really know what he's talking about, I find that a little hard to believe. Of course, I don't know. There's no proof of that. Now, we know that Asa is an old-school gamer who doesn't like the direction that new games have taken. Now, watch his first Pissed Jose review, where he's supposed to be spoofing Joe. The review is Final Fantasy 13, which we now know that Joe disliked. Now, please listen to what Asa is saying, though. It's obvious he snuck in his own feelings of the game into the spoof. Why that game? Perhaps Final Fantasy 13 represents all that is wrong with new games to him? I don't know, maybe. Therefore, Angry Joe, who champions newer games, might be a representation of all that is wrong with the gaming community these days. Therefore, the I am the champion of gamers line probably offended Asa more than it did most. And because Joe is actually popular, him convincing fans to get behind games of what Asa perceives to be of poor quality will just harm the gaming world. My last bit of proof for this, and I know it's definitely a flimsy theory, is that if Joe was that bad, worse than Game Dude, Irate Gamer, NC-17, whoever, all of which had major information faults and horrendous jokes of Ira's robbed proportions, then why is that the only shot he could take? And out of any of Joe's reviews, and the VGA response was that Joe disliked the Civilization game. Joe stated that Civilization 5 was for people who didn't care for the other games, but most fans of the older games don't seem to care too much for Civilization 5. I mean, is that the worst that ASA could think of? This makes me wonder how many of Joe's videos that ASA's actually seen. But once again, it's just a case of old versus new, and ASA just happens to hate the new, so he hates Angry Joe. There's another possibility here, and that's just maybe, I'm looking way too deeply into this. But all in all, this is just a disagreement. Like I said, I'm a fan of Asalieri, and I thought his review was alright still. I think it was pretty important. It wasn't as good as his older stuff. I just don't think Asalieri really had any drive to review Angry Joe until I said good things about him. So that's it. Hopefully I didn't waste your time too much. I'll see you later.